I first entered foster care when I was just before my 7th birthday, and I ended up going through 11 years of foster care all the way up until 18, and in that time spent my life rotating through about 20 different placements. In that time, I've had about 4 different social workers, and all of them were great in different ways. The first one I had was Gianni Chow, and she was the one who, kind of led me through that beginning period when you're a little kid and you're scared and you don't know what's really happening. And she was very nurturing and really helped guide me. I don't have any baby pictures, sadly. This is just before I turned 7, I believe. So it's the youngest picture I ever have, and this is sitting right outside that Lucky's, because that's where we were sitting when we got picked up to be taken into foster care right there. I had Renee Miles, and she was one of the greatest social workers I think that exists. She was just so good, and the only reason I didn't have her, she actually got promoted, so I was sad. But that led me to be able to meet Sara Garza, who was probably one of the biggest influences of my entire life.
When I first received Jory's case, he was kind of missing. He was actually on runaway, but had called in to Renee Miles, his previous worker, and let her know where he was. So I met him out in Wildemar.
Ended up going to 9 different high schools in mostly my freshman and early sophomore year, and finally graduated at one in Fontana High School. And that's when I aged out of the system and was able to kind of start my journey on my own. One
of the things that really stood out about Jory was the fact that he had always put in an effort with his academics no matter where he was going. So that was evident. You know, he had good grades despite the fact that he had been bouncing all over the place. So his aptitude was obvious. Now, getting him to consider going to college, that was a bit more of a struggle.
I had originally wanted to be a vet when I was a child, and I also wanted to be a pilot, and I was good with either or. But at that time, I wanted to be a pilot when I met her. And she convinced me, instead of going to the Air Force right away, go to college first, get your degree, and if you still want to be a pilot, go ahead and go be a pilot. And I said, okay, fine. After a long battle, I finally said, okay, fine, I'll go to college instead. Which was great because in college I decided I do actually want to be a veterinarian more than I want to be a pilot.
And I think he was one of the first youth that I worked with that went to university. I had other youth in the past who were eligible to go, but for whatever reason they didn't want to. Oftentimes they just wanted to leave. With him though, he stuck it out, and he was actually graduating at 17 and in college at 18. And he was willing to work really hard, and he stayed focused.
Getting into vet school was like, it felt like just a culmination of a lot of successes and a lot of getting over obstacles, you know. So after 4 years of vet school that were amazing, they're like the best 4 years of my life. Now I'm graduated, and it's like surreal, you know. It's just like, okay, now I'm actually a doctor. I've been working for this for 11 years, on top of obviously the schooling you go through as a kid. So I've been working for this my whole life, and now I'm finally a doctor.
And despite circumstances that were not ideal, you know, not being happy where he was at, he kept his eye on his goals and he worked hard to achieve them.
You're never gonna get somewhere if you're always looking behind you. I think that one of the things that allowed me to push forward is that I kind of just let my past go. So this is a book that I made when I very first got into foster care. My first foster parent took me around to all the places that I had sort of lived at when I had lived with my parents to kind of get an idea of what my life was like before. Here's just another motel. Pretty much any motel that's on Foothill Boulevard in Fontana, I've lived in those motels. This is one of the bushes that I lived under. It's burnt in this picture. It wasn't burnt when we lived there. This is just a picture showing under that bush. We lived in a couple bushes. This is another one of the bushes. This is probably one of the main bushes, I think, that we slept under when I was homeless. Don't give up on what you're doing. That's super generic, but it's just true. The people who are successful are people who don't let no come in their way. So those are my two things. Don't look in the past and don't give yourself an excuse.